How do we respond when God's work shows up in surprising ways? These are ways that we would have never thought possible, yet God's work is there before us, challenging our expectations of what is possible. We hear today in Luke in the meeting of Mary and Elizabeth. In this meeting, we see God at work, rewriting human expectations and revealing the unexpected work of God that is to bring peace. And all of this is revealed through two women whose voices, actions, and faith set the stage for the coming of the Lord. Mary, having just learned from the angel Gabriel that she will give birth to the Son of God, travels to the hill country to visit her relative Elizabeth. Mary is young, she's unmarried, and now she is miraculously pregnant. Elizabeth is older, married, and pregnant with John the Baptist. They meet in Elizabeth's home, two women who have been chosen to bear witness to God's saving work. Here in this encounter of Mary and Elizabeth, their voices are centered in this narrative of God's work. In a culture and biblical tradition where women were so often overlooked, silenced, or ignored, God chooses to reveal God's work through them. He places two women at the heart of God's incarnation. And through their faith, their joy, and their willingness to say yes to God, we see the world beginning to change. When Mary arrives, and before Mary can even speak of the angel's news, Elizabeth knows the truth. She proclaims it boldly. "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb." Her words are an affirmation of who Mary is and who her child will be. Elizabeth declares that the child Mary carries is none other than her Lord, and she blesses Mary, not only for being the mother of Jesus, but also for Mary's faith. Elizabeth welcomes Mary. Elizabeth honors Mary and celebrates her, despite the social expectations that might have told her to do otherwise. Mary's situation could be considered shameful. Some in her community may have judged her, shamed her, perhaps even rejected her entirely. She treats Mary as more honorable than herself. In doing so, Elizabeth continues the pattern of God's social reversal, where the lowly are lifted up. How often do we choose to lift others up rather than judge them? During this season of Advent, we have been looking at the ways we can practice peace by examining our scriptures during this Advent season. We see how Mary and Elizabeth practice peace, peace that comes not from the absence of challenges, but from trust in God's presence and promises. Elizabeth could have responded to Mary's unexpected arrival with judgment, but instead, she chooses peace. She allows the Spirit to guide her heart, welcoming Mary with joy and grace. Her words and actions transform what could have been a moment of tension into one of deep affirmation and harmony. Elizabeth chooses peace over judgment, hospitality over rejection. A few weeks ago at the beginning of Advent, I spoke about how waiting is not passive and is actually an active spiritual practice as we wait for the second advent of Jesus. This peace, practiced by Mary and Elizabeth, is also not passive and is a spiritual practice. It is an active peace, the kind of peace that allows relationships to flourish and God's love to be present in Mary and Elizabeth's midst. In welcoming one another, Mary and Elizabeth create a space of peace. They practice the peace that Jesus will embody, a peace that meets people where they are. This is a peace that overcomes fear, overcomes judgment, overcomes shame. This encounter between Mary and Elizabeth I think invites us to consider our own openness to God's work in the world. Like Mary and Elizabeth, we live in a time when God is at work through unexpected people and in unexpected places. But are we willing to see that? Are we willing to listen to the Spirit's prompting and recognize the bearers of God's new reality, even when they show up in forms that challenge our expectations? Who in our community today might we be called to honor and love in ways that reflect God's grace? When Elizabeth welcomed Mary, she reflected the radical, inclusive love of Jesus. She looked beyond Mary's apparent shame to see the work of God's grace, and she responded with joyful peace. Amen.